Alan Moore is one of the most acclaimed comic book writers of the last 50 years. From legendary takes on Batman and Superman to his own creations such as V for Vendetta and Promethea, his career is full of groundbreaking works that stand at the peak of the genre. In this video, I'll be talking about 5 of my favourites. Captain Britain was one of the first ongoing comics that Alan Moore wrote for. The character had been through numerous writers and artists, starting with Chris Claremont and Herb Trimpe, but his earlier stories are very formulaic, just typical superhero battles, with nothing really to make them stand out. Moore took over in the middle of a storyline where the character was trapped on a parallel Earth, battling villains inspired by Alice in Wonderland. In the introduction, he explains how he neither inaugurated this storyline nor completely understood it. So he killed off the character and brought him back to life, enabling him to reset the book and start again from scratch. He did bring back certain elements from past stories, such as Betsy Braddock, who would later become Psylocke in the X-Men, and Captain Britain's archenemy, the Slaymaster. But he also introduced new elements, such as the Special Executive, a race of alien mercenaries who had previously appeared in his Doctor Who comics, and he greatly expanded the parallel universe idea with the introduction of the Captain Britain Corps, made up of different Captain Britons from alternate universes. And he also introduced the unstoppable robot called the Fury, who was intent on killing all of them. The final storyline has the reality warping villain Mad Jim Jaspers turning the UK into a grim dystopia, similar to that in V for Vendetta, and it ends with epic battles against Jaspers and the Fury. It's fascinating to see how the story develops from an incomprehensible mess at the start to become an epic tale of good versus evil. Captain Britain himself is still quite a bland character, but he's surrounded by bizarre and eccentric allies and enemies, and it doesn't really matter. Alan Davis's artwork is a big part of its success, able to go from big superhero battles to more surreal and experimental layouts with ease. And Davis continued to work on Captain Britain after Moore departed, firstly with Jamie Delano, and later with Chris Claremont in the X-Men spin-off Excalibur, both of which are also worth reading, building on the concept that Moore developed and carrying them forwards. A few years later, Alan Moore was recruited by DC Comics to take over their horror comic Saga of the Swamp Thing. Again, this has already been through numerous creative teams, starting with Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson. In all previous stories, the character was presented as a man who found himself stuck in the body of a swamp monster. Moore decided to revamp the character, establishing that his original body was dead, and his mind was able to take over any patch of vegetation and use it as a host body, allowing the character to travel all over the world. The first story has the Swamp Thing going up against the Floronic Man, who's taken control of all plant life on Earth. There are some beautiful descriptions of the Justice League. There is a house above the world where the old people gather. There is a man with wings like a bird. There is a man who can see across the planet and wring diamonds from its anthracite. There is a man who moves so fast that his life is an endless gallery of statues. In the house above the world, the old people gather. Later in the run, the horror side comes back to the forefront, with arch-villain Anton Arcane terrorising his niece, Abby, by possessing the corpse of her husband. This is strong stuff, and together with the gruesome artwork of Steve Bissett and John Totalben, Swamp Thing became one of the first comics aimed at mature readers, and paved the way for the Vertigo line. The mature theme continues as Swamp Thing and Abby become a couple, with psychedelic scenes as they consummate their relationship, and this would provide the emotional centre of the entire run. There is then a series of short stories exploring traditional horror tropes, such as werewolves and zombies, which also introduces the character of John Constantine, an arrogant wizard who manipulates Swamp Thing for his own ends. And Constantine, of course, went on to have his own long-running comic, Hellblazer. Later in the run, Swamp Thing leaves Earth entirely, and it becomes a collection of science fiction short stories, as he travels from world to world, interacting with many of DC's cosmic characters along the way, until he is finally reunited with Abby back on Earth. The book carried on after Moore left, with Rick Veitch taking over the writing, and it kept on going for many years, with Swamp Thing and Abby's relationship at the forefront, and subsequent writers expanded on the concepts that Moore had introduced. After Swamp Thing, Moore's next big project was Watchmen, in which he got to create an entire superhero universe, although the characters were all loosely based on characters originally from Charlton Comics. This has a much more cinematic feel, with no omniscient narration or captions, and characters' inner thoughts are only expressed through their diary entries. This was one of the first books to attempt to create a realistic psychology for superheroes, with Moore figuring that anyone who would dress up in costume to fight crime must be at least as disturbed as the villains they fought. And all the protagonists are screwed up in one way or another. And the depiction of sex and violence is graphic enough that it's definitely not for kids. Every issue of Watchmen is intricately structured, with repeated visual motifs, symmetrical page layouts, non-linear storytelling, all of it executed beautifully by the artist Dave Gibbons, working from Moore's notoriously detailed scripts. As well as the comics, every issue contains supplemental material within universe books, newspapers, and magazines, all providing masses of background detail and really fleshing out this fictional world. There's even an entire pirate comic story interspersed within the main narrative, which adds yet another layer of depth to the whole project. It's really one of the densest fictional narratives in comics, and I'm really only scratching the surface in this video. There's been countless analysis of it over the years, and it's generally regarded as one of the major achievements of the comics medium. There have been various prequels and sequels in the comics over the years, as well as a movie adaptation and a TV sequel, but none of them come close to the original. Truly a work of art. After Watchmen, most of Moore's more significant work took him away from the superhero genre, as can be seen in From Hell, a historical book about Jack the Ripper. This is an absolutely massive tome. It's got 16 chapters, ranging from 8 pages to 58, but it's absolutely compelling throughout. It's based on the theory outlined in Stephen Knight's book, Jack the Ripper, The Final Solution, which speculated a massive conspiracy involving Freemasons and the royal family, culminating in the Jack the Ripper murders. Rather than starting with the murder investigation, as you might expect, this book unravels the whole sequence of events, taking its time to introduce all the important characters and slowly moving towards the inevitable murders. In doing so, it dramatises the lives of countless people of the time, from prostitutes to policemen, doctors to lawyers, and you end up feeling like you've been given an insight into the whole of society at the time. It also delves into the mystical history of London, expanding on the secret past of its countless landmarks, all beautifully depicted through Eddie Campbell's artwork. He has a very distinctive style, which does take some getting used to, but the detail in the street scenes is incredible, and the stark black and white ensures that the murder scenes never get too gory. A lot of the same techniques from Watchmen are used again, with the same 9-panel grid cropping up frequently, and the killer's mental state is depicted by him having frequent flashbacks and flash-forwards throughout his life, in the same manner as Dr. Manhattan. There is also a fantastical element as the killer sees visions of the future, as he believes his murders are a mystical right to bring about the 20th century. And if you're wondering how much of this is fact and how much is fiction, there is a detailed set of annotations at the back, where Moore goes into some detail explaining which scenes were invented and which are based on historical facts. This is well worth the read and full of witty asides. I didn't get around to reading this book until recently, but I'm very glad I did. It's a stunning achievement and much better than the movie. In more recent years, Moore's most high-profile comics work has been on the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. The first volume imagines a team-up between characters from classic Victorian literature. Alan Quatermain, Mina Murray from Dracula, The Invisible Man, Dr. Jekyll, and Captain Nemo. It's a simple but irresistible premise, and Kevin O'Neill's artwork provides beautiful splash pages when needed and distinctive character work in more intimate scenes. Volume 2 expands the premise further, with the same characters fighting the aliens from War of the Worlds. This volume increases the sex and violence content, so it's definitely for mature readers only. And it also features a lengthy epilogue, the New Traveller's Almanac, in which the characters travel through just about every fictional country dreamt of in literature, which makes you realise that this universe is really a mashup of every fictional world ever created, which is kind of mind-blowing. This idea is further elaborated on in Volume 3, Black Dossier, which is mainly comprised of a collection of fictional documents from this Uber universe, which allows Moore to give his versions of everything from a Shakespeare play to an H.P. Lovecraft story told in the style of P.G. Wodehouse, which is hilarious, to a Jack Kerouac-style stream of consciousness narrative, which, if you ask me, is virtually unreadable. But it is a staggering work of imagination, and possibly the high point of the whole series. Later volumes take the characters into the 21st century, thanks to them becoming immortal, but these do suffer from Moore's obvious dislike of modern pop culture. He obviously considers any fictional work created during the last 50 years or so to be not worth bothering with. So it's just full of evil, corrupt versions of everyone from James Bond to Harry Potter, which starts to feel a bit didactic. And the final volume, The Tempest, is again a beautiful piece of art, but it's really just an homage to the comics of his childhood, and he seems to be saying that the 1950s were really the peak of the sci-fi genre, which I do not agree with. Still, Moore has now retired from comics, and is now mainly writing prose novels instead, so I look forward to reading them. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments what your favourite Alan Moore stories are, and maybe I'll do a part 2 of this someday. Until then, see you next time.